If you're investing money through a broker or a money manager, there's a very good chance that you're making a costly mistake without even realizing it. If you want to protect yourself and your money, this is something you need to understand and fix. When you deal with a professional, you naturally trust their expertise, but at the same time, you may not feel confident enough to question their advice. You feel you don't have the experience, the training, or even the language to challenge what they're telling you. And that's where the real problem begins. Because in that moment of self doubt, you suspend your own independent judgment. That is a very costly mistake because suspending your judgment, your independent thinking, means that you're surrendering control. And in matters of your own money, giving up control is never a good strategy. To appreciate why independent judgment matters so much, it is really important that you understand the broader financial system that you're operating in. The global asset management industry controls more than $100 trillion of investors' money, and it collects roughly $100 billion every year in fees and commissions. And those fees are paid regardless of whether your money, your portfolio grows, stays the same, or declines. That single fact deserves your full attention. You're a tiny individual inside a vast, indifferent machine, and you're carrying all the risk. When things go well, you benefit. When they don't, you absorb all the loss. No one is coming to compensate you, to protect you, or to help you out. The consequences land entirely on you. We saw this in devastating clarity during the 2008 financial crisis. Millions of ordinary investors followed advice which at that time sounded entirely reasonable. But when the markets collapsed, investors in stock markets had no protection whatsoever. The big institutions were bailed out, ordinary people were not. The system functioned according to its own logic, and that wasn't about protecting individual investors. That's a harsh reality you need to understand. Now, the scale and the indifference of the system is only part of the problem. The deeper issue is what happens when you are actually dealing with the advice given to you. Most people don't have the expertise to evaluate financial advice. They can't challenge it technically, they lack the conceptual training to ask the right questions, and so they tell themselves that the professionals have done the thinking at a level that they themselves could not match. They accept the advice on trust. Some feel actively uncomfortable questioning it, as though doing so would expose their own ignorance or even seem rude. That discomfort is exactly where the risk begins. The less confident you feel, the less you question, and the less you question, the more you rely on someone else to do the thinking for you. Without realizing it, you step back from a decision that was still entirely yours to make, and from there, a pattern takes hold. When things go well, you take it as a confirmation and lean more on the advice. When things go badly, you feel disappointed, maybe even misled, but by then the damage is already done. Realizing this pattern is the first step in breaking out of it. That is where you begin to take back control of your money. And you don't have to be a financial expert to do it. It requires something far more simple: confidence. Confidence in your own ability to think for yourself, to exercise your own independent judgment. Start with some very basic but very necessary questions. What information went into this recommendation? What patterns or trends were driving your thinking? What alternatives did you consider? Why does this approach make sense right now? Can you walk me through your reasoning in a very simple, plain language? And what are the most important risks beyond the standard disclaimers? These questions bring the underlying thinking out into the open, often far more than you would expect or appreciate. And what you find there tells you a great deal. When the thinking is sound, it shows. A competent professional is comfortable explaining their reasoning to you. They welcome your questions as part of the process, and they are neither offended nor threatened by them. Their ability to explain clearly in a simple language that you can actually follow is itself a sign of quality. On the other hand, when the thinking itself is weak, the cracks quickly begin to show. Sometimes it looks like confusion. The explanation loses its thread, or the logic doesn't hold up under scrutiny. Sometimes it looks like concealment. The response evades your question, retreats into excessive jargon, or meets your curiosity with irritation, as though being questioned is an imposition. But here, let's be very clear. Asking questions is not an imposition, it's your right. After all, it's your money, you are paying for this advice, and the professional, they're not giving you any charity or doing you any favors. The best part, you don't need technical expertise or knowledge to judge the response. You just need to pay attention. Ask yourself, do I feel genuine clarity after the explanation, or am I working to convince myself that it makes sense? Does this leave me feeling reassured, or does it leave me with a quiet, nagging doubt that I can't quite fully understand or name? Trust that doubt. It is usually telling you something real. The moment you start asking questions, something changes in the power dynamic. You're no longer a passive recipient of advice. You are an active, engaged participant. Your advisor knows that you're paying attention. They know that you can't simply be pushed around into a direction without explanation. The balance of power, which otherwise would have sat heavily against you, begins to shift back towards you. Where before you were dependent, accepting whatever you were being told, you now have genuine agency. And that agency, built not on expertise but on the confidence to question and the clarity to evaluate what you're hearing, is what separates people who get the good outcomes and those who just simply keep hoping for them. I'll see you in the next one.